This is video 1.4, and in this video we're going to look at the two remaining forces, starting off by looking at availability of alternatives. So by alternatives, it does not mean competitors from within the industry we're analysing. Rather, it means replacement products or services from other industries. And what these do is they place a price cap or a ceiling on what the businesses within an industry can charge. So a good example of an industry whose profitability greatly suffers from the fact that there are lots of available alternatives would be the short-haul airline industry. So alternatives here come in the form of the car, the train, the coach, or perhaps people wouldn't travel at all, they'd use something like video conferencing. So even if a short-haul airline had a complete monopoly in the market, so let's say it's the only short-haul airline, it still couldn't charge whatever it wanted because after a certain price point, people would simply switch over to one of these alternatives, thereby placing a price cap or a ceiling on what the business can charge, and thereby driving down profitability. Consequently, this force has a detrimental impact on the profitability of the short-haul airline industry, and therefore this is deemed to be a strong force in relation to the short-haul airline industry, because there are lots of available alternatives that place a price cap or a ceiling on what a short-haul airline can charge. However, in relation to the soft drinks industry, if we think very broadly about the soft drinks industry as an industry, there are not too many alternatives to the soft drinks industry. Consequently, this force does not have a detrimental impact on the profitability of the soft drinks industry, and therefore this is deemed to be a weak force in relation to the soft drinks industry. Finally then, ease of market entry. And this is perhaps the most interesting of all the five forces, but the one that takes the most understanding. So if you remember, in video 1.2 I mentioned that prior to Michael Porter's work, it had always been assumed by executives and investors that fast growth marketplaces would always be profitable because of the growing amount of demand and the low level of competition. But we can already start to appreciate why this is not necessarily always going to be the case. Because if, for example, within an industry, all the customers care about is price, meaning there's a strong influence of customers, or let's say there's one very powerful supplier that controls the key raw materials that all the businesses within the industry are reliant on, meaning there's a strong influence of suppliers, or let's say there are lots of available alternative products or services that place a price cap or a ceiling on what the businesses within the industry can charge, meaning that this is also a strong force, then the businesses within the industry are probably not going to be all that profitable, certainly not for very long, even if this is a fast growth marketplace. However, even if none of these factors are present, the businesses within the industry will still not be profitable for very long if it's a very easy market for new competitors to enter into. So another important consideration is the ease with which new competitors can enter into the market, which is otherwise known as ease of market entry. This is because if it is very easy for new competitors to enter into a market, as that market grows, rather than the existing competitors becoming more profitable, all that actually happens is a load of new competitors rush into the market and all fight it out over market share, thereby forcing the existing competitors to keep their prices to an absolute minimum and or their spending on new product development, marketing and advertising to a maximum in order to put off the new competitors from entering into the market and thereby driving down profitability. In fact, the easier it is for new competitors to enter into a market, the less profitable the existing competitors become. And again, this varies dramatically from industry to industry. So a good example of an industry where the existing competitors are far less profitable because it's so easy for new competitors to enter into the market would be the high street coffee shop industry. It's fairly easy and straightforward for anyone to set up their own high street coffee shop. And as a consequence of this, the existing competitors, the likes of Starbucks, are forced to continually invest in new store layouts, new menus, Wi-Fi zones, all of which increase the cost of their business, but none of which they'd have to do if this was a difficult market for new competitors to enter into. So we can start to appreciate that the most profitable businesses tend to be in those industries that are difficult for new competitors to enter into. Because in these industries, the existing competitors can grow unfettered, without any real concern that new competitors will enter into the market and steal their market share. These industries benefit from what are referred to as barriers to entry, that make it more difficult for new competitors to enter into the market. So a good example of an industry that benefits from barriers to entry would be the computer chip industry, because of the amount of investment and technological know-how required to set up within this industry. Clearly, it'll be easier to set up a high street coffee shop than a computer chip manufacturing plant. So we can start to appreciate that barriers to entry exist in those industries where a high level of investment and or a high level of technological know-how are important, and these are to the benefit of the existing competitors. However, these are not the only industries where existing competitors benefit from barriers to entry. Barriers to entry actually exist in 7 different types of industry. And as we will see later on in this course, it's important we understand the nature of the various barriers to entry in order for us to develop the best strategies possible for improving profitability. So, in addition to these industries where a high level of investment and a high level of technological know-how are important, barriers to entry also exist in those industries where having a wide network of users is important. This is because in those industries where having a wide network of users is important, such as online social networks, online dating sites, online games, the value of their service increases in accordance with the number of users. So where the more users there are, the more valuable the service becomes. So where there is an established business such as Facebook with lots of users, it becomes very difficult for a new competitor starting from ground zero without any users to break into the market, thereby giving the existing competitors a real head start. This type of barrier to entry is sometimes referred to as demand-side economies of scale, and as I say, exist in those industries where having a wide network of users is important. The 4th type of barrier to entry exists in those industries where existing competitors have developed a widely adopted industry or technical standard, particularly where users have learned how to use that technology and do not wish to learn how to use a new product, and or where complementary products have been developed to conform to that standard. So a good example might be a mobile phone operating system, where users have learned how to use that operating system and where a wide range of applications have been written for it, thereby giving the existing competitors a real head start. The 5th type of barrier to entry exists in those industries where existing competitors have obtained exclusive rights to carry out certain activities, perhaps for example as a result of entering into an exclusive agreement with a third-party business, perhaps as the result of creating intellectual property rights, such as patent or copyright, perhaps as the result of some kind of government policy, maybe which grants a limited set of licenses to a few businesses. Or exclusive rights could be created as the result of a business securing a favourable physical location. The 6th type of barrier to entry exists in those industries where brand or reputation are important. So for example, the soft drinks industry. So because there is a high level of brand loyalty in relation to the existing competitors such as Coke and Pepsi, any new startup business has to spend an absolute fortune on marketing and advertising before customers are even willing to try their product, let alone completely switch over to it, thereby giving the existing competitors a real head start. And the final type of barriers to entry exist in those industries where goods are mass produced. And that's because in those industries where goods are mass produced, they benefit from what's referred to as supply side economies of scale. This is where the bigger a business gets, the more it can spread out its fixed costs. So for example, the cost of building and running an automated manufacturing plant over more products. So the bigger they get, the cheaper it becomes to manufacture each individual product. So because, for example, Coke and Pepsi literally manufacture millions of cans of Coke and millions of cans of Pepsi, the cost to manufacture an individual can is minimal, and certainly much cheaper than it would be for a new startup business which is unable to spread out its costs over so many products. In fact, a new startup would have to start out immediately as big as the likes of Coke and Pepsi in order to gain the same cost advantages as Coke and Pepsi. In addition, in those industries where goods are mass produced, the big existing competitors such as Coke and Pepsi can bulk buy their ingredients, again giving them a real cost advantage over any new startup businesses. So this, combined with the fact that Coke and Pepsi have a strong brand, means they do not need to concern themselves all that much with new competitors coming into the market and stealing their market share. Consequently, they're not forced to keep prices to a minimum and or spending on new product development, marketing and advertising to a maximum. And because this force does not have a detrimental impact on the profitability of the existing competitors, this is deemed to be a weak force in relation to the soft drinks industry. So let's turn our attention now to the short-haul airline industry. So would you think this was a difficult or easy market to enter into? Because common sense would perhaps suggest that this was going to be a difficult market to enter into because of the amount of investment and know-how required to set up within this market. However, surprisingly perhaps, analysts consider this to be quite an easy market for new competitors to enter into. First of all, you do not need to buy a plane. You can hire a plane, you can hire a gate. You can start out with one flight between two destinations and gradually grow the business. All the technology is generic and is widely shared across the various businesses. So surprisingly perhaps, neither of these first two factors present any kind of real barrier to entry. Having a wide network of users is not relevant within this industry, and no airlines owns any kind of technical or industry standard. Sometimes airlines do have exclusive deals with certain airports. However, such deals would be fairly rare within the short-haul airline industry. You might think brand or reputation would be important, but it turns out that all the airlines use the same types of planes from Boeing or Airbus. The fuel is the same, and the pilots will have received pretty much identical training. So in reality, passengers are more than happy to fly with a new startup airline if the price is right. There's no real brand loyalty. And finally, goods are not mass produced within this industry. Consequently, there are no real barriers to entry in relation to the short-haul airline industry. And the existing competitors know this. They know that if they overcharge for any given flight, a load of new competitors will rush into the market, hire planes, hire gates, and undercut them and put them out of business, thereby forcing the existing competitors to keep their prices to an absolute minimum and thereby driving down profitability. Consequently, this force has a detrimental impact on the profitability of the short-haul airline industry, and therefore this is deemed to be a strong force in relation to the short-haul airline industry. So that completes our look at Porter's 5 forces. And as we have seen, it provides us with a structured approach to breaking down any industry into its component parts. And we can apply this very quickly to an industry. So for example, very quickly in relation to the short-haul airline industry, so a high level of intensity of competition where they find it hard to compete over anything other than price. Customers are very fickle. All they want to do is fly from destination A to destination B as cheaply as they possibly can, keeping pressure on price. A limited number of suppliers, Boeing, Airbus, fuel providers and skilled workforce, keep costs high. We said surprisingly it's a fairly easy market for new competitors to enter into, keeping pressure on price. And finally, there are lots of available alternatives to the short-haul airline industry, the car, the train, the coach and so on. However, in relation to the soft drinks industry, they do not just compete on price. Customers are not all that fickle. If you like drinking Coke and Coke puts its price up by a few pence, you're probably still not going to switch over to Pepsi. Thousands of different suppliers, they can use the main ingredients of water and sugar, and the workforce is largely considered to be unskilled. We said it's a fairly difficult market for new competitors to enter into. And finally, there are not too many alternatives to the soft drinks industry. So as I say, we can apply this very quickly to any industry. But this is just the starting point. Once we become familiar with the nature and characteristics of each of the 5 forces at work within an industry, we can then start thinking about the types of strategies we can use to address the forces and thereby improve profitability. And this is what we will look at in the next video. So please now click on video 1.5. We'll look at how we can use an industry analysis to develop strategy.